So at first, I thought I was bigender, and then I was like, no, I guess I'm just a trans woman. And then and then a couple years later, I realized that my initial instinct was more right than my second one. I call myself a gender queer trans woman. I'm a woman, but there are non-binary aspects of my identity. Um, I like to describe it like, you know how like a line, and then like this side is male and this side is female. I don't consider this middle space non-binary. I consider everything around the line non-binary, and I'm like connected, like I'm like floating out in space, but there's like a kite line from female to me. I'm floating off in this amalgamous non-binary space, but there's still a deep connection to like being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it should be said that when I was a kid, um, of course, stereotypically, I was not like other kids. Um, I liked for my grandma to paint my nails. I had more girlfriends than I had boyfriends, etc., etc. Something happened, and I've always contributed to a particularly bad bullying on the playground because my nails were painted. I don't. Human memory is fickle. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but I got bullied on the playground real bad, and then like after that, it was like negative reinforcement. I realized, oh, these are the behaviors that people don't want me to do, which they have told me they don't want me to do through their bullying and negative comments and all this stuff. So I stopped that, and then my entire life was like those feelings would like return. So like I remember, so that happened when I was around 5 or 6. And then when I was going through puberty, I would remember like going to sleep pretending like I have a vagina. Um, and but I've always like, I'd been suppressing things for so long at that point that I was just like, yeah, everyone probably does this, I'll not talk to anybody about it and sweep it under the bed and just like pretend like it didn't happen. Um, and then by the time I came to Western, I was dating this girl, and she already knew, based on my understanding, that I was probably not cis. She had a couple trans friends. I didn't even know that being trans was a thing. Um, and like through our interactions and our discussions, the foundations of who I thought I was had already started to crack a little bit. Um, and then I came here, and it was my second semester of my freshman year. I was taking a class taught by Dr. Hoyt in the philosophy department called Bioethics and Medical Justice. We talked about trans people in that class for like 2 or 3 weeks, and there was a moment where we were watching a documentary. I don't remember what the documentary's name is. About kids who were trans, who were like 5, who were like, I'm a girl trapped in a boy's body, or vice versa, and like the social barriers that they had to dodge and all this stuff. And I was just like, the lights were going off and dots were
Yeah.
connecting, and I was like, oh dear God. Um, and then I kept it to myself for a long time. Sort of not suppressed it, but I mean, I guess it was still a form of suppression. I just didn't tell anybody. So before my senior year, I came out for the first time to my friend Jesse, and then I spent the rest of my senior year. I like within the first semester of my senior year, I probably came out to 8 people. And then that's where I stopped. I was like, I'm cool with that for now.
Mm-hmm.
I told my friends, and then that was it. And then I
Yeah.
went home, and I was back in the closet, and I was there for like 4 or 5, maybe 6 months. And I think going back in was good for me, because when I came back here, I ripped the closet door off on my way out. And I hit campus, and I was like immediately like, this is my name, these are my pronouns, whatever. Um, uh, And then eventually I came out to my family, consistently coming out to my family, specifically my mom, was like, was a recurring thing that we talked about in our sessions for like 8 months leading up to it. And then it got to the point to where it was like, I'm starting hormones next month. Like, we are out of time.
Yeah.
And then so my therapist and I talked about the ways that we could do it. And my mom is not a reasonable human being. Um, she's not necessarily a bad person, I don't think. I think she's very much a victim of how she grew up and who raised her and how she was raised. A conversation where her and I were face to face, and I said, "Hey, mom, I'm trans," was never going to work. So we were like, well, maybe a letter is the way. So I wrote a letter. And then I sent the letter, and I paid a shit, like, having the delivered normally was like $1.25, and I paid like $7 for them to text me when the letter got dropped off. And then it was, letter got delivered around noon. So, it was 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And then finally got to a point where I was like, I am so hungry. I hadn't eaten all day. I just walked 12 miles. At this point, the need to eat is overriding my emotions, saying that I'm too nervous to eat. So I started walking to my apartment, and I got about halfway there, and then I got a text from my stepdad that said, "quote, your mom is gonna kill herself." And I was like, Jesus, I knew that it was gonna be bad and over dramatic. I never would I never would have guessed that, like, that bad. But basically what had happened was my mom had gotten the letter, read it, freaked out, called him, called my brother Jared, called Bradley, demanding, like, did anybody know this was coming? Did anybody know this was happening? After finally my stepdad got home and my mom declared she was going to kill herself, turned her phone off, and left the house, and he just let her. Like, was just like, okay, go. And then, according to her, she went to a church and prayed for 3 hours. It's this version of the story that I got. So then finally around 9 p.m., she called me. And we had like a 45-minute conversation that was probably the least productive conversation I've ever had with a human being in my entire life. So, she was like, biology. And I was like, here's a bunch of information that disproves what you just said. And then she would switch to religion. And then I was like, here are some Bible verses. And then she would be like, and we would just, every time I refuted her, she would just change the subject. And she said a bunch of things. She said that, I should give it time before I transition, that God answers prayers in mysterious ways. Well, for like 6 months afterwards, we would just like, everything would be fine for a month. And then we would have the same argument. And then we would be fine for a month. And then we would have the same argument. And now it's gotten to the point to where she's called me by the right name like 3 times, 4 times, maybe. She's never gendered me correctly, but she's called me her daughter several times. For Christmas, she got me a little necklace with a little metal ring on it, and the ring says, "My best friend, my best daughter," or something like that. And yeah, I would like to say that that's where my coming out story ends, but of course it isn't. I come out like every other day or something. There's this like pressure that we all put on ourselves to know your label, know what you are. And I want to put on record that that's fucking bullshit. Experiment. If you get your label wrong, that's fine. I went from bigender to trans to gender queer trans. 2 years from now, I'm going to be gender queer, hyper, whatever. Labels, like, first of all, you change, labels change. And even if you don't change it, you still get your label wrong, that's fine. Like, play around with labels. Don't have labels. Do whatever you want. Which leads me to my second point, in that, like, I wish that people would stop participating in queer discourse on the internet. It's dumb. It's always dumb. Somebody always has a bad take that you're going to disagree with. One person's experience in being queer is different from everybody else's experience in being queer. Be gay, do crimes. Down with capitalism.